semester. I thought I would go ahead and get the due diligence, as I call it, out of the way, and give you a little background. Rick Bragg is a native of Alabama, born and raised in northeastern Alabama, near Jacksonville, which is where the stories in our common reading are set, and the mill was. He worked for several small newspapers after going to college and studying journalism, and eventually in 1994 joined the New York Times, was a correspondent out of their Atlanta office, covered such stories as the Oklahoma City bombings, also the Susan Smith trial, things that we're familiar with. In 1996, he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for feature writing. I think the citation said, for stories written about contemporary America. He was with the New York Times till 2003. He has written several books, most notably his first and highly acclaimed memoir, All Over But the Shouting, in 1999. A follow-up to that, Ava's Man, in 2002. I'm a Soldier 2, the Jessica Lynch story, in 2003. The Prince of Frogtown, I think the third member of the trilogy of your memoirs, in 2008. And of course, our common reading selection, the essays, the most they ever had about the closing of the last textile mill in the South. Mr. Bragg currently is a contributing editor to Southern Living magazine. If you've never picked it up, pick a copy of it and look at the back. They're quite delightful. His monthly column is Southern Journal. He is currently a writing professor at the University of Alabama in their journalism program in the College of Communication. He says college students terrifying. I'm hoping he's gotten over that one now. I first encountered Rick Bragg. I think I told this story. It was late one night, probably a dozen years ago. I have a bad habit of reading papers about 1 o'clock in the morning because I'm a night owl, and I was looking for something besides an infomercial for background noise. And as I was flipping through the channel, I heard this distinctively Southern drawl speaking. Very charming gentleman was reading and talking about growing up in Alabama. And I stopped. It was C-SPAN book note. Yeah, I know, all of you watch that. And I didn't read any papers for the rest of that next hour or so. I wrote down the name and the title, and immediately went out the next day and bought a copy of the book and read it and loved it. And anybody who asked me if I'd read anything good lately or what would I recommend, I would mention All Over But the Shouting and Rick Bragg in the same breath. I was kind of whiny because I would say, we need to do one of his books for the common reading. And that went on for several years. In 2006, Kay Brown and I, actually we went to Bowling Green for the Southern Kentucky Book Fest to see primarily Pat Conroy. But it turned out that Bragg was there, and as we were standing, the line to see Conroy and get the books signed was a mile long. But he was all by himself, all alone. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to go talk to Rick Bragg. And so that was the first time I chatted with him. I'm sure he doesn't remember a thing. But I do remember this. I bought a copy of Ava's Man because I needed one. And then I said, I have to buy another copy of All Over But the Shouting. I said, I love that book so much that I gave it away to a very good friend, and I told him to give it away and just keep passing it on. And so he kind of looked at me and said, well, nobody's ever told me that before. And so I just really enjoyed him last fall. He was here with Kentucky Wesleyan doing All Over But the Shouting. And Kay and Tanya, our other co-chair, we just started chatting with him and said, you know, maybe you could come up here and you could be our common reading selection. And I had been saying, and when they told us that we were going to do The American Worker, I said, oh, I have just the book. Because I picked it up a couple of years ago and had read it. I didn't know it had been published. And it just moved me and spoke to me. I could see those people. I know those people. They were my brothers, my parents, my grandparents. They're students I have today whose jobs have been downsized, moved off, closed down. I go past a symbol of that every day as I drive home. The old Han factory they're tearing down right now. For as long as I was alive, it was always there on the corner of Parrish and Wing Avenue. It's not there now. So I have those students in my classes as well, and I really hope this book spoke to those issues, those things, and those feelings, and what's going on in the country. And I'm just delighted that we chose it. And I'm delighted that I have the privilege of introducing Rick Bragg to you. And I hope that you find that you love his work so much as his words that you give it away too.
I was going on book tour, and author actually said to me, Rick, darling, and they actually talk like that, said, Rick, darling, you must insist on one thing. One thing. I want you to remember these two simple words. You know, while you're on book tour and you get tired, always remember peanut butter sandwiches. And I said, well, ain't that 3 words? And they just act funny. I tend not to do that. I'm very grateful to see you here. I'm honored that you young people were forced beaten, threatened into reading the book. And you can look at me and say that you enjoyed it anyway. You can say that. But we all know it started with brute force. So it really isn't going to do any good. But every now and then something wonderful happens, and it'll happen sometime today. Maybe not in the same way, but a young man walked up to me at a book signing, and it was in the South, and he spoke my language. As a matter of fact, he looked just like me. He looked like a 19-year-old version of me. And he walked up and he kind of dropped the book down on the table, and I said, teacher made you read that, right? He said, yeah. I said, did you at least like it? And he looked me right in the eye, and he said, and I won't have to explain this up here in Kentucky. He said, this book and long cut snuff got me through my freshman year. So I got no snuff for you, but thank you for reading the book. But what I was going to say was the one thing I asked for, it's not peanut butter sandwiches and it's not M&Ms with all the red ones picked out, but I always want a lectern. I want a lectern. And the reason I want a lectern is because if I have a lectern, I don't have to stand up here for 1 hour and 15 minutes and hold my stomach in. Unless, of course, some genius gives me a glass lectern. Do y'all have any idea what it's like to hold your stomach in for 1 solid hour? Do you know what kind of misery that is by the time you're finally through? The reason they don't want you to stop me as I walk up the aisle to sign books, it doesn't have anything to do with maybe running us late or making folks mad up in the lobby. I will explode. Because we are at a college, this has got to come off with at least the facade of a highbrow literary event. I wrote that book to keep a promise. And really, it never would have been written if it had not been for the books that came before it. All Over But the Shoutin' was the first book I ever did, and it was a book, it was a love story about my mother. My mother really did raise me and drag me along 1,000,000 miles of cotton on back of a cotton sack so that I would have a chance to come here and see y'all. She really did go 18 years without a new dress so that I would have a chance to come here and see y'all. She really did take in a mountain of laundry. She told me once, when I was little, whatever you do, son, don't stick your thumb in the wringer. So I stuck my thumb in the wringer, shut down the washing machine, cost her a week's worth of work because I tore it all to pieces getting it out. And I always helped her where I could. But that is the truth. So, you know, I did Shoughton, and then I did Ava's Man because we did Shoughton, and then we did Prince of Frogtown because I did those first two books. And as I was doing that book, which was a look at my daddy, who was, and some of your daddies may have had characteristics of my daddy. My daddy fought in the Korean War. He killed a Chinese soldier by holding his head under a stream of water. He drank too much and fought too much, loved my mama but didn't do right, which is where the first paragraph of All Over But the Shouting came from. And I don't read much from the books when I do a talk because, one, it's hard enough to sit through one of these things anyway when you're 18. It's really hard when some guy's droning on and on. But when I got ready to write the book about my mom, I knew I had to explain my daddy. And I wanted to do it with an image, a detail. That's how you write effectively. Some of you are sitting out there right now thinking about writing your own story. The way to do it effectively is to do it with color, imagery, detail. Don't preach. Don't tell. Show. Show. So the first page of All Over But the Shouting became, I used to stand amazed and watch the redbirds fight. They would flash and flutter like burning rags through a sky unbelievably blue, swirling, soaring, plummeting. And on the ground they were a blur of feathers stabbing for each other's eyes. And I've seen grown men stop what they were doing, stop pulling corn, or pull their head out from under the hood of a broken down truck just to watch it. And once, when I was little, I watched one of those birds peck itself to death in the side mirror of a truck, hurling itself against that unyielding image until the glass was cracked and smeared with blood. And I asked an old man who worked for my Uncle Ed, an old snuff-dipping man named Charlie Bivens, I said, Charlie, why did that bird do that? And he told me it was just its nature. So that was my daddy. And that explained why my mama had to be the jewel that she was.